Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we ride into the Ottoman twilight with a sultan, his steed, and a quill soaked in feelings, because history isn't always war drums and decrees. Sometimes, it's one man in embroidered slippers riding about the curve of a horse's neck like it's a miracle. You're not going to survive this emotionally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and feel free to post your local time and where you're listening from. I love seeing how far we drift together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are sitting cross-legged in a tiled courtyard that smells faintly of figs, leather, and crushed mint. The air is heavy with early dusk, the kind of blue that lingers on the skin like a memory you're not ready to shake. You're about 8 years old, and the cushion under you is embroidered with tulips. Not because you asked for it, but because you're a prince. And princes don't sit on bare stone. The pen in your hand is heavier than it looks. Real gold, your tutor says. Too heavy for a child, you think. But you say nothing. You are learning already. In the garden beyond the arch, you hear the soft snort of a horse. You've been hearing it for hours, not galloping, not restless, just there, breathing, waiting. The stable master said this one is for you. A gift. You don't want it, not because you dislike horses, but because you're terrible at riding. Last week, you fell off a practice saddle so dramatically that 3 servants ran screaming for a doctor. You weren't hurt, but your pride was, and that bruise is longer. Your tutor clears his throat. Back to Arabic calligraphy. You trace the letters slowly, deliberately, as your mind drifts toward the stable again. You're not thinking about glory. You're thinking about how strange it is that something so large can seem so gentle. That's the part that's sticking in your chest. You don't have words for it yet, but you will. The sun drops lower. A shadow moves across your page. Your tutor sets down a fresh sheet of vellum. He says, write something of your own. You hesitate. Then, quietly, you write, she watches me with eyes darker than figs. Your tutor says nothing, but he doesn't make you stop. That night, you meet her. The horse thought she's gray, almost silver. Her mane is braided in careful loops. She's taller than you expect and doesn't flinch when you approach. She exhales. You inhale. Your palm on her nose feels like silk against breath. You forget to be afraid. She does not bite. She does not shy. She just looks at you. And in that moment, you begin something, not quite love, not yet, but something shaped like it. The next day, you write again. She carries the wind but steps like silence. The page curls in the sun. Your calligraphy is uneven. Your heart is worse, but you don't stop. You write her once, then again, then every day for a month. You name her something foolishly poetic. No one remembers what. The stable boys snort behind your back, but you're already writing about her more than anything else, more than battle tactics, more than Quranic verse, more than politics or lineage or your growing list of obligations. Even when your tutor scolds you for wasting paper, even when your mother tells you, enough about that horse, even when your brothers tease you, still, you write, because you're not really writing about her, not just her. You're writing about stillness, about breath, about the quiet place in you that only wakes up when you're near her, and you don't have another word for that yet. So you call it poetry. Historians still argue whether you wrote your first full poem at age 10 or 12. The paper's gone, burned in a fire, lost in a war, eaten by time, but the subject, they know that. It was always the same, the horse. Section 2. You're 12, and your hands are still too soft, too careful. The sword master says it every week, clucking his tongue like a disappointed rooster. You grip like a calligrapher, not a warrior, he says, which is funny, because you are a calligrapher. Sort of, you spend more time with pens than scimitars, more time with hooves than generals, and lately, more time hiding your poetry in your sash than memorizing maps that you've started using metaphor to describe everything, which drives your tutors absolutely mad. Your math instructor asked for an equation yesterday, and you wrote, love is half of longing divided by distance. You had to copy real numbers afterward, of course. But still, Worth it that you've begun to understand something dangerous. People underestimate poets, and you like that. Topkapi Palace, your home, is a maze of courtyards and tension. Peacocks parade through rose gardens like minor royalty. Eunuchs whisper like wind through reeds. Everyone's watching. No one ever looks relaxed. It's exhausting. So you slip away. Often, not far, just to the stables. She's waiting. The gray mare, your feet crunch softly on straw as you approach her. She huffs a greeting, nuzzles your sleeve, almost like she knows when you're upset. Maybe she does. You whisper your new poem to her while brushing her mane. In her shadow, I forget the shape of crowns. It doesn't skin perfectly, but she doesn't mind. You ride her past the fig trees, past the fountain where pigeons bathe, out into the edge of the royal hunting grounds. Always with a guard nearby. But the guards have grown used to your strange routines. One of them even asked if you'd write a verse for his dog. You did. It wasn't great, but he was thrilled. Word starts spreading. Quietly. Among pages, servants, gardeners. The prince writes poetry. Loves a horse more than politics. That you're not sure how to feel about that. On one hand, you do love politics. You're fascinated by treaties, succession laws, the way borders can bend with just a word. But you hate how people talk during official dinners. The way they perform intelligence. Like every sentence is a sword waiting to be drawn. With your mare, there's no performance, no pretense. Just breathing. Hooves. Heartbeat. Quiet point. One morning, you oversleep. Miss breakfast. Miss a briefing. Panic a vizier. Your excuse? I was writing. They roll their eyes. But you weren't lying. You were writing about the way she turned her head yesterday, the way her ear flicked when a fly landed, the way her tail moved like punctuation. That you're not obsessed. Not really. You're just attentive, and attention, you're learning, is a form of devotion. Historians still debate when exactly your earliest surviving poem was written. Some say this year, age 12. Some say later. But the one most scholars agree on, because it's copied in 4 different calligraphers' hands, is the one that begins. You were not born from stables, but from the clouds. And I, foolish boy, asked to ride the wind. The ink on that copy is flecked with what might be teardrops. Or spilled tea. No one agrees. The original is long gone. But her name, they preserved that. Or at least, the version they liked best. Gulbahar, spring rose. Not because she looked like one, but because her presence made everything else bloom. And you just kept writing, even when no one understood why. Section 3. You're 15, and the air in the palace is thicker than usual. Not with heat, though Istanbul in summer feels like breathing through silk, but with something subtler. Expectation. Everyone's looking at you a little longer than they used to. Measuring. You're not sure what for. But you know how to behave like you don't notice. That's the trick. You've realized. Act oblivious while noticing everything. Your oldest brother is the obvious heir. Broad-shouldered, quick with a joke, excellent at looking important. He likes horses, too, but the fast ones, the loud ones. His favorite has a name like a war cry and legs like catastrophe. You never race. You glide. Gulbahar doesn't like to rush unless you ask her gently. She prefers rhythm. A walk that matches your breath. Hoofbeats like punctuation to your thoughts. One day, you return from your usual ride to find the palace quiet in a strange way. Not empty, never that, but muffled. Like something just happened and no one knows how to tell you. You see your mother's eyes first. They're dry. But only just. She says your brother is dead. No details. No ceremony. Just gone. You're too stunned to ask questions. You only nod. Gulbahar presses her nose to your cheek later that evening. You whisper your grief into her mane. The sky cracked open. But you stayed whole. The funeral is grand and grim. Incense, laments, draped silk. You stand still and wonder if it's wrong to feel anything beyond shock. But mostly, you feel watched. Whispers curl behind doors. You hear your name more often. The youngest prince. Too poetic. Too quiet. But still next in line. It's not official. Not yet. But something shifts. Your mother tells you. One night when the wind smells like thunder, they will expect you to be stronger now. You don't say it out loud, but you think, I'd rather be kinder. You still write, now more carefully. You start disguising metaphors, replacing hoofs with hope, mane with mist, stable with sanctuary. A court advisor asks you to write a verse for a diplomatic gift. You oblige. The poem is about a falcon, but everyone reads it and says, the prince is finally thinking about war. You smile politely, but inside, you're laughing. Historians still argue whether your rise began with your brother's death or your poetry's first political use. Either way, both happened in the same season. You begin to notice the world treating you differently. Servants bow deeper. Tutors pause before correcting you. The Grand Vizier addresses you by title, not by name. And Gulbahar, she's exactly the same. Bless her. She doesn't care about succession, only that you remember to bring figs. You sit in her stall that evening with a lantern, writing on your sleeve because you forgot your journal. When they crown me, will I still smell like horse? You hope so. Section 4. You're 17, and suddenly everyone wants something from you. Your breakfast includes 3 different requests tucked under your bread plate. One from a pasha lobbying for a new province, one from your mother urging you to smile more in public, and one from a court poet trying to rhyme justice with caravan. You choose slowly. You don't answer any of them yet. You're watching the sparrows on the balcony railing. They hop like they have nowhere urgent to be. You envy them. Top copies courtyards feel smaller now. Not physically, there are still dozens, but spiritually. Every corridor is a potential alliance. Every fountain conversation, a test. You carry yourself straighter. Speak less. You've noticed people fear silence more than speeches. You keep writing. Only now, you do it in layers. Your poems are clever. Point 1 stanza for the public. One for your horse. Point 1 for history. One for yourself. Your favorite hiding place is a small room near the library, behind a tapestry no one bothers with. You write there by oil lamp, surrounded by ink pots and the steady scent of dried lemon. Tonight, you pen this. They say the sword is swifter than the pen slash, but neither outruns a gallop. You smile. You like that one. The court doesn't quite know what to make of you. You're not reckless like your father was, not bloodthirsty like your uncle, not docile like your cousin, who once fainted at the sight of goose blood. You're composed, measured, but weird. At least by palace standards. You ask visiting scholars about Andalusian horse breeds. You host small salons in the garden, where wine is served but only if the poetry's good. You once postponed a military meeting to tend to Gulbahar's sprained ankle. A vizier muttered, his priorities are equine. You had that phrase embroidered onto a handkerchief. You carry it often. Historians still discuss your early reign as a time of surprising restraint. You didn't conquer. You consolidated. You reorganized the treasury. You improved veterinary care in the cavalry. You wrote 27 poems in 6 months, 3 of which included elaborate metaphors comparing hoofbeats to prayer. Was it strategy? Was it softness? Was it distraction? Scholars can't agree. You knew, of course. But you never said. You liked the mystery. At court banquets, you drank little but listened much. Ambassadors feared you, but not for your threats, for your quiet questions. At one dinner, a foreign dignitary mocked your poetic reputation. Something about sultans writing love letters to livestock. You smiled and responded with a toast to the creatures who carry us, often with more grace than we deserve. No one laughed, except Gulbahar. Probably. She'd have whinnied in approval. That night, you wrote her another verse. Even marble halls grow cold / but your breath is always warm. You don't show it to anyone. Not yet. Some things are just for you. Section 5. You're 19 when she first stumbles. It's small, barely noticeable. Just a shift in rhythm as you're riding past the fig orchards, like a missed heartbeat in the middle of a lullaby. But you feel it. You always feel her rhythms. You dismount immediately. Inspect every hoof yourself. The stable hands assure you it's nothing. A stone bruise, maybe. Some stiffness from the colder weather. But your chest doesn't agree. It hums with something worse. You sit beside her stall that night. You write, if she limps, the world leans with her. The next morning, She walks evenly. You exhale, but you don't forget. Your advisors notice you're distracted during meetings. You forget the name of a regional tax officer. You sign a decree with a flourish that curls into the margin, something you only do when you're thinking about her. They attribute it to stress, or boredom, or youth. But really, it's just worry. You've grown into your title now. The sash is fit. The crown doesn't feel like a costume anymore. You deliver verdicts, lead ceremonies, dictate foreign policy with a calm confidence that confuses your enemies and mildly alarms your allies. But you still write poems on scraps of old orders. Still keep one hand near your inkpot when listening to state secrets. Point one evening, during a reception, you overhear two generals talking about you. Good head for numbers, one says. Strange fixation with that horse, says the other. You smirk. Fixation? You'd write them an essay. You'd write them epics. You'd pen an entire military campaign in verse, if they'd sit still long enough to read it. But instead, you just pour a second glass of wine. Let them stew in their misunderstanding. Historians still bicker over the number of poems you wrote to Gulbahar. Some say over 100. Some say only 25, but copied obsessively by admirers and scribes. A few deny the poems were ever about a horse at all. Symbolic, they argue. Allegorical. Clearly about a woman. They underestimate how much a horse can mean. That evening, you sit in the garden under stars that blink like old gossip. Gulbahar rests beside you, her nose in clover. You press your forehead to hers. She huffs gently. You say nothing. She says even less. But you both understand. In the morning, you write. Empires speak with banners slash, but I only need your breath to feel brave. It's not your best work, but it's honest, and in your experience, truth always gallops quieter than fiction. Section 6. You're 21 when you start hiding your letters. Not because they're scandalous, though some court gossips would disagree, but because they're starting to feel too vulnerable. You've begun addressing your poems directly to her now. Not the royal she. Not the abstract you. But her. Gulbahar. You fold the paper into narrow triangles. Slide them between saddle blankets, inside tack boxes, under the edge of her feed bin. No one ever sees you do it, except maybe the groom, but he doesn't tell. You're not sure if it's loyalty, amusement, or the quiet solidarity of someone who also talks to animals more than people. Point one day, he smiles and says, she seems to like poetry. You blink, then nod. I hope she never learns to critique meter. He laughs. A soft, stable laugh, the kind that smells like hay and doesn't echo. You ride through the city more often now. People line the streets to see their poetic sultan, their horse-besotted monarch. You wave. Gulbahar trots with regal indifference. A child once asked if she was magic. You said, only to me. At court, the jokes about your writing haven't stopped, but they've softened. Point one noblewoman requests a poem for her wedding. Another asks if you'll write a prayer for her sick greyhound. You oblige both. Kindness costs nothing, and truthfully, you like imagining a world where verse matters as much as victory. Historians often note your curious blend of public detachment and private fervor. They try to explain it with upbringing, trauma, power, but none mention the small moment that defined your writing. The day Gulbahar nuzzled your chest after a long ride and you whispered, I think you understand me better than anyone. You meant it. Still do. Even now, the poems keep coming. You're not sure who they're for anymore. Her, yourself, a future reader who might one day understand what it meant to love without claiming. One night, after a long meeting about river taxes, you write, you never asked me for silver slash only space enough to run. You tuck it into her saddle strap. In the morning, it's gone. Blown away, taken by a groom, read by her. Somehow, you decide not to ask. Some mysteries ride better when left unsaddled. Section 7. You are 23, and the throne is officially yours. No regents. No shadows of older brothers. No court advisors hovering over every decision pretending not to judge. It's just you now, and the weight is real, not metaphorical, that you still prefer metaphors, but literal. The ceremonial robe alone could double as a sail. The crown itches. The scepter feels less like a symbol and more like a blunt instrument you'd never actually use. The ceremony is all gold and incense and bows that go on too long. People chant your name. Musicians play songs composed specifically to make you seem mythic. You try to look majestic, but all you can think about is whether Gulbahar got her usual oats. Your mother watches from a shaded balcony. She looks proud and tired. The court poet reads something sonorous. You barely hear it. Later that night, you sneak into the stables still wearing the edge of your regalia. Gulbahar whinnies softly, either unimpressed or just annoyed you're late. You feed her an apple stolen from the banquet. She accepts it as her due. You press your forehead to hers. Whisper, I would rather have crowned you. You don't write that down. Some lines are too sacred for ink. The next week, the state begins its slow, bureaucratic transformation under your hand. You introduce new trade policies, ease border tensions with carefully worded letters, some of which include couplets. No one seems to mind. In fact, your poetry begins appearing in diplomatic correspondence as a sort of signature flourish. Foreign rulers are intrigued. A Venetian envoy comments, most sultans send threats. Yours sends sonnets. You nod. He doesn't realize a good sonnet is a threat. If you know how to aim it. Still, not everyone is pleased. Your council grumbles. Some whisper that the empire is becoming soft, that the sultan would rather write about horses than provinces. You take this criticism seriously. You double grain production, lower tariffs, and resolve 3 border disputes in 1 month. Then you write this. They call me gentle / but I've trained storms to wait for my signal. Historians still debate whether your early years as sole ruler were poetic experimentation or strategic persona building. Some say you knew exactly what you were doing. Others think you just liked rhymes. You don't clarify. Why ruin a good mystery? Meanwhile, Gulbahar is aging. She still walks with that elegant glide, but the edges are slower. She no longer bolts at loud noises. Her mane grays further, though you'd never tell her that. You write about her more often now, not as muse, but as memory. As mirror. You once joked she was the only thing in the empire not afraid of you. It wasn't a joke. One night, after a meeting where 4 men shouted over each other about land rights, you retreat to the stables again. You write, the world bends when I speak / but she never did. You don't show it to anyone. Some things are just for her. Section 8. You're 24, and war is inevitably at your door. Not because you want it, because someone else thinks they can take what isn't theirs. A border dispute flares into something louder, hotter, full of drums and declarations. You'd rather it didn't. But empires are not always run on preference. You summon your generals, review maps, approve supply lines, send messages by courier, hawk, and caravan. You meet with your navy, whose admiral smells perpetually like brine and leather, and nod gravely while thinking about rhyme schemes. You do everything expected of you. And then, quietly, you write a poem about saddles. Victory smells like sweat and cracked leather / not glory. You don't sign it. It still finds its way into a soldier's song. Gulbahar is too old to travel with you now. You tell her that gently, resting your hand between her ears. She closes her eyes, accepts your decision, probably understands it better than you do. You leave her in the care of the only stable boy you trust entirely. You say, if she limps, I will feel it 3 provinces away. He nods solemnly, then adds, she'll probably just bite the new groom again. You almost laugh. Almost. You ride a younger horse into battle. Strong, obedient, but silent in the wrong ways. You miss Gulbahar's little snorts of complaint. Her head turns at every metaphor. This one just blinks. On the 3rd night of travel, you wake up in your tent and write. This one moves like thunder / but I miss the rain. It's not your best, but you're tired, and the fire outside is too bright to sleep. The campaign begins. Your troops do well, disciplined, loyal, sharp. You've trained them to expect commands wrapped in parables. They joke. Our sultan gives orders like bedtime stories. You let them. It keeps morale up. And anyway, it's true. Historians note that you rarely lost skirmishes. They credit your logistical brilliance. They don't mention the saddlebag where you kept a copy of every poem you ever wrote to Gulbahar. The fighting drags on. Months. You send letters back home, point one for your vizier, point one for your mother, point two for your mare. The scribes don't know what to do with that. They file them anyway, labeled personal. One day, during a lull between engagements, a young soldier asks if it's true you once compared your horse's tail to a comet. You pause, then smile, and say, only because it was. Later, you rewrite that poem. She carried stars / and still had room for me. You tuck it into your coat, close to the heart, where she's always ridden. Section 9. You're 25, and the campaign is over. A decisive treaty, signed in a tent that smelled like dust and tension. You didn't even bring your best pen. Just used the one handed to you, goat hair nib, half-dried ink, a little cracked. You still made the signature elegant. Everyone says you handled it well. Swift. Strategic. Satisfying. The borders shift slightly, favorably. You're greeted with celebration upon return, rose petals flung from balconies, drummers in the streets, baklava stacked like a victory pyramid, and still, the only thing you care about is whether she's there. She is. They've cleaned her up, her coat brushed silver again, her bridle polished. But it's her eyes you care about. Still steady, still watching. You approach slowly, like a pilgrim. She leans toward you. You whisper, "Did you wait?" She snorts, which you choose to interpret as obviously. You breathe again, but something is different, not broken, not gone, just slower. She doesn't nuzzle you as hard, doesn't stamp her foot. She's tired. You run your hands down her neck and feel it, beneath the fur and muscle, the slight give. The years later, back in your study, you try to write about it. She waited / but time didn't. You hate it. Tear the page in half. Try again. I left with fire / returned to embers / found the same warmth. Better. Still not right. But better. You start spending more time in the stables again. Advisors grumble. Your mother gives you a look that says, you're a sultan, not a groom. But you just smile and say, empires run better when their horses are calm. No one knows how to answer that. They don't. Point one afternoon, while brushing her mane, a court official arrives with a petition about canal taxation. You ask him to read it aloud while you work. He does, uncomfortably, standing between two water buckets and a very unimpressed mare. You approve the tax but add a footnote suggesting grain subsidies. Later, the official tells someone you smell like apples and saddles. This becomes a rumor. You don't mind. Historians point to this year as the beginning of your dual reign style, half emperor, half enigma. You held court in gardens, negotiated treaties while pruning fig trees, and once gave a speech with hay in your hair. But you were also more efficient than any ruler in a century. Trade boomed. Literacy rose, and quietly, more young people started writing poetry. About small things. Personal things. Point one girl sent you a verse about her cat. You framed it. That winter, Gulbahar begins sleeping more. She doesn't come to you when called, just lifts her head. You don't blame her. You still bring figs, still whisper verses into her ears like promises you hope she'll never need. And in your journals, which you now hide behind the tapestry in your library, you begin a new piece, not for publication, not for the court, just for her. It begins. You outlived my impatience / outloved my ego / outrun every ending I feared. You'll finish it later. Section 10. You're 26 when the poem leaks. Not one of your polished court pieces. The ones that go through 5 scribes and a style advisored. Number one of those. The ones folded into saddle blankets, tucked into grain bins, scribbled between meetings on the back of diplomatic drafts. Specifically, the one that read, "I've kissed no hand holier than the one with grass between its hooves." The scandal is immediate, not because it's shocking, you're a poet, and poets are always dramatic, but because it's real, unfiltered, unvarnished. A direct glimpse into what you feel when no one's watching. And the court doesn't know what to do with that. They argue. It's metaphor. No, it's madness. Clearly about a woman. Clearly about a mare. Clearly about power. Clearly about something we should never discuss again. You don't confirm or deny. Instead, you send for the court calligrapher. He's nervous. He thinks you're angry. You hand him the poem. The real version, Not the leaked copy. You say, frame it. Display it in the garden hall. No title, just the words. He hesitates, then bows, and says, "It's unusually personal, Your Majesty." You nod. So is leadership. That evening, you visit Gulbahar. She doesn't care about controversy. She cares about apples. You bring 3 that you stroke her flank and whisper, "They know now." She blinks. You write later. "They read my love aloud / and still didn't understand it." That week, poetry submissions to your court triple, from merchants, from soldiers, from a midwife who compares childbirth to thunder and figs. You read every single one. Historians still analyze your choice not to censor the poem. Some call it radical transparency. Some call it indulgence. Some call it madness, cloaked in meter. But your people write. And that, you think, is worth all the scandal in the world. You add a stanza to your secret collection. Let them misread me / let them decorate my metaphors with fear / I wrote it for her, not for them. Your advisors suggest you stop writing for a while. You don't. You write more. You write everywhere. On curtains. On menus. On the inside of your own sleeves. Your mother sighs. The stable boy shrugs. Gulbahar snorts. It's enough. You begin composing a longer piece. A full sequence. 20 verses. All for her. You plan to read it to her when it's done, but not yet, not yet. Section 11. You're 27 when the sky goes quiet. It's early morning, and the palace is hushed in that particular way that tells you something is wrong before anyone speaks, before a single servant dares to breathe loud enough to be blamed. You're in your writing robe. Ink on your sleeve. A half-finished verse on your desk. Her breath teaches the wind to soften, but you stop. The door opens. It's the groom. Not the usual one. This boy is new. Nervous. He doesn't speak right away. Just stares at the carpet like it might help. You already know. Still, you ask. A whisper. Did she fall? He nods, then shakes his head. She didn't get up. You stand. Walk past him. No shoes. Just the soft pad of bare feet over cold stone. The stables are quiet. Too quiet. She's lying on her side, eyes half-lidded, not gone. Not yet, but close. You kneel beside her. The groom disappears. Smart boy. You place your hand on her flank, still warm, but not strong. You whisper her name, then whisper your OWN.as if reminding her who you are might give her a reason to stay. She flicks an ear. You smile. That's enough. You don't cry. Not yet. You just sit and breathe until she doesn't anymore. Historians don't write much about this day. It's not in the state records. No official decree. But that week, your handwriting changes. Your letters slope downward. Your poems get shorter. Your silences stretch longer. You cancel 3 meetings. Order all your court poets to take a holiday. Refuse to accept foreign gifts for 7 days. Your mother says nothing. Just sits with you while you stare at the same fig tree for an hour. Your calligrapher tries to offer comfort. Says, perhaps you'll write something immortal. You nod. You already have. You write that night. Of course you do. She left before the world was ready / or maybe just when I needed to start missing her. You don't show it to anyone, but you do tuck it under her blanket, folded small. A farewell that fits in a hoofprint. Section 12. You're 28, and the stables are too quiet. No snort of greeting. No rhythm of hooves on packed earth. No gentle head nudging your shoulder when your thoughts drift too far into politics. Just straw and silence, and the smell of where she used to be. You still visit. Every morning, out of habit, out of grief, out of something wordless. The stable hands don't speak when you come in. They nod. About .1 quietly refills the feed bucket out of reflex, then winces, realizing. You wave him off gently. Old habits die harder than horses. You try a new horse. A sleek bay, elegant and well-trained. She's fast, obedient, sharp-eyed. But she doesn't flick her ears the same way. She doesn't listen with her whole body. And when you recite lines aloud while riding, she doesn't even turn her head. You stop after 3 days. Not her fault. You weren't looking for a mount. You were looking for someone whose Gone. The court thinks you're adjusting well. You're efficient again. Focused. Decisive. You pass laws about canal upkeep and artisan wages. You revise inheritance codes. You even negotiate a truce between two rival port cities without raising your voice. Everyone praises your clarity, your new sharpness. They call it growth. You call it silence. You write in secret again. Long, meandering verses. Odes that start about trade routes and end with metaphors about hoofbeats and salt. You write, "The world keeps asking what I've lost / and I keep pointing at the empty stall." Your mother tells you it's time to remarry. You say you'll consider it, but you don't. Instead, you find yourself sketching horses in the margins of your reports. Not well. You're not an artist, but enough to remember the shape of her point. One morning, the calligrapher brings you a surprise. He's taken a dozen of your older verses, ones never meant for court, and written them in gold on indigo parchment. Illuminated the margins with wildflowers and small silver hoofs. You hold it in your lap for a long time. Say, "It's too beautiful." He says, "So is she." You nod. Don't speak. Later that day, you tuck the scroll into a cedar box. Bury it beneath a fig tree. You don't mark the spot. You'll remember. You always do. Section 13. You're 29 when the ambassador asks about her. Not directly. No one outside the court dares. But in that polite, diplomatic way that pretends curiosity is impersonal, a tea dinner, over spiced lamb and pomegranate wine, he leans slightly forward and says, "Is it true you once dedicated an entire treaty preamble to mare?" You pause mid-sip, look at him, smile gently, say, "No then. It was just the dedication. The treaty had its own preamble." He laughs a little too loudly. You don't. Back in your study that night, you reread the document, but it's true. The dedication line is short, written in a different hand than the rest. "To the one who taught me to move without conquering." You still remember the moment you wrote it. Her eyes, the stillness before a ride. That strange, comforting knowingness she always carried. People call your reign peaceful now. Elegant. Measured. They say your calmness comes from wisdom. Or excellent advisors. Or sheer, divine temperament. You never correct them. But privately, you know, it came from riding alongside something bigger than your pride. You still dream of her. Not often, but vividly. Sometimes she's standing in the garden again. Sometimes you're on her back, galloping across the Bosphorus like water. Doesn't matter. Sometimes she just looks at you, and you wake up feeling understood. You keep writing, of course. You never stopped. But the poems are different now. Less ornate, shorter, more like whispered prayers than proclamations. Your latest reads, "No one taught me how to stay / only how to return." You don't show it to anyone. You keep it in your sleeve. Right above the pulse point. One afternoon, a young page approaches. She's nervous, hands you a folded square of paper. "I wrote something." Because you write. You unfold it. It's 3 lines. About a cat, a window, and missing someone small. It's clumsy. Beautiful. You smile and say, "Keep going." That night, you write, "If her gift was movement / mine is memory." You begin planning a writing school. Point 1 open to children, and "Oh noble blood required." Anyone can learn grace, you tell the architect. And maybe poetry, too. Historians call this your legacy period. Statues go up. Treaties are archived. Scholars debate your syntax. But none of them know about the fig tree. Or the scroll beneath it. And that's how you want it. Some truths aren't for textbooks. Some truths are hoof-shaped. Section 14. You're 31 when they try to write a play about you. A court dramatist, ambitious, hair too neat, approaches with scrolls and stars in his eyes. "A tragicomedy," he says, "about the Sultan who ruled with verse and silence." You ask, "Is the horse in it?" He hesitates. You wave him away. He returns a week later. "Yes," he says, "but she's a metaphor." You roll your eyes so hard your turban nearly shifts. Still, you let him write it. Not because you like flattery, but because you're curious. What will the world do with your softness? The first reading is staged in a marble courtyard. paper lanterns swaying above like soft stars. You sit in the back, veiled, unannounced. The actor playing you is far too loud. His poetry sounds like shouting. The horse is a girl in a gray shawl who makes whinnying noises at odd moments. It's a disaster. You leave. Halfway through. Later, the playwright finds a note pinned to his chamber door. Just one line. She never needed translation. You still ride. Not as often. But often enough. Not on her, of course. But always through the same path she knew, fig groves, olive trails, the quiet pond where she once tried to eat your shoe. The new horses are respectful, but never familiar. Point one of them. A chestnut mare with a white stripe nudges you often. You almost let her in. Almost. But grief is a garden with high walls and no gates. You walk it alone. You write less frequently now. Or maybe just more carefully. Fewer metaphors, more space between. Stanzas. Point one entry reads, there's no poem for what she was / only footprints. You commission a mosaic for the garden wall. It's small. Simple. A single gray hoof on a field of gold tile. No inscription. The mason asks, no name? You smile. She already knows it. Historians write about your cultural reforms, your support for the arts, your unexpected shift from military to literary legacy. They mention your poems in passing, cite them like clues, but never quite get it right, which is fine. You didn't write them for accuracy. You wrote them because you had to. Some rulers carve loss. You carved longing. And that, too, is empire. Section 15. You're 33, and your dreams have become quieter, not gone. Just less cinematic. No more galloping across clouds. No more midnight fig trees whispering back. Now, it's flashes. A soft muzzle in your palm. A braid loosened by wind. The sound of hooves that don't quite touch the ground. You wake rested, but not whole. That part stayed behind. Somewhere in the fields where she used to trot. You begin composing a different kind of poem now. Less about her, more about what she left behind. When the wind moves, I hear her / even when I don't want to. The stable is quieter these days. There's a new colt born last month. Frantic legs, awkward body, too many opinions. He's nothing like her. You visit anyway. Bring apples. Watch his gait. The groom older now, like you, says, he's stubborn. You say, then he's promising. At court, the conversations have shifted. Less about borders, more about legacy. A scholar presents you with a hand-bound volume. Your poems, collected, indexed, annotated. You flip through. They footnoted your metaphors, explained your lines. You laugh, once, deeply. They've tried to trap her in analysis. You whisper. The scholar doesn't understand. You don't explain. Instead, you order 50 more copies. Point one for every major library. Because maybe, just maybe, one reader will skip the footnotes and simply feel what you felt. You begin mentoring. Young poets. Young rulers. Anyone brave enough to lead with gentleness. They sit in your garden. Read aloud. Ask about structure. You answer. But always end with, truth isn't technique. It's memory, whispered carefully. They never know quite what to do with that. Which is fine. Point one evening. You walk alone. Just past the fig grove. To the tree. You press your palm to the bark. The ground is soft. And you think, not dramatically, not tragically, just softly. I'm still writing. Just more slowly now. You don't write that down, but you carry it with you. Section 16. You're 35, and the empire runs without you for a day. Not in rebellion. Not in chaos. Just functionally. Your vizier handles petitions. The treasury balances. The postmaster even remembers to adjust caravan tolls on the southern trade route. You spend the day in the stables. You don't ride. You don't write. You just sit on a low bench, worn soft with time, beside the empty stall that still smells faintly of hay, leather, and memory. Point one of the younger stable boys walks past. He doesn't know. Not really. He asks if you'd like a mount saddled. You shake your head. He nods and says, she must have been something. You smile. Yes, you say, she still is. In the garden, the wind shifts. You think you smell apples. Later that evening, a visiting prince asks to see your famed poetic library. You oblige. He flips through pages carefully, reverently. He asks, Is it true the gray mare was real? You say nothing. He continues. I thought she was symbolic. Like justice. Or the soul. You say, all souls need stable footing. He doesn't laugh, but he looks thoughtful. Historians later debate whether this was your wittiest or most cryptic response. Both are correct. You begin drafting a small book, not for publication, just for safekeeping. It's not a history. Not exactly a memoir. Just moments. A braid falling loose. A hoof print in mud. A poem that got soaked in the rain but still reads like longing. You title it. For her ears only. Seal it in a cedar box beside her old bridle point one evening. You hold the bridle again. It's frayed. Now, soft at the edges. You bury your nose into the leather. It smells like spring, like first rides, like the wind that understood you. You write, I ran a kingdom / but I only ever wanted to walk beside her. You tuck the line into your coat pocket. It stays with you for days. Your advisors note you've grown quieter, more introspective, more prone to long pauses mid-meeting. You haven't changed. You've just become more yourself. And that, too, is a kind of power. Section 17. You're 38 when they ask you to sit for a portrait. The painter is famous. She's traveled from Venice, brought brushes wrapped in velvet and a polite, determined expression. She sets up in the garden. You oblige her. Robe of state, posture straight, expression somewhere between serenity and remembering where you buried half your soul. She asks what you'd like behind you. A throne, a map of your empire. You say, a horse. She blinks. Your current mount? She asks, reaching for charcoal. You shake your head. No, the horse. She hesitates. From memory? She asks. You nod. She had silver in her coat and the moon in her eyes. Start there. She does, and slowly, with careful strokes, Gulbahar returns. Not exactly. Not perfectly, but enough. You sit still as the sun shifts behind the fig trees. You feel her shadow again. Almost warm. The portrait takes a week. When it's done, the painter shows you with a flourish. You stare, not at your own face, calm, royal, immortalized, but at her. She's there, just behind your shoulder, framed in gold leaf and soft light, looking at you like always, like she never left. You say, quietly, frame it with cedar. Hang it in the hallway near the east stables. She nods. Leaves. You stand alone with the painting for a while. You whisper, you're home again. That night, you sleep better than you have in months. In your dream, she walks beside you through the palace gardens. No saddle. No reins. Just steps, side by side. The fig trees bow. The air smells of apples and something older. You wake with a phrase. I never needed to ride / just to be followed by grace. You write it down, fold it into your sleeve. The courtiers comment that you seem more grounded lately. More content. They say it like it's surprising. You just nod that you've stopped trying to explain things that are shaped like hoofbeats. Section 18. You're 40, and the city breathes easier under your rule. There are fewer conflicts, more festivals, poetry contests in the plazas, children reciting verses about birds, bread, rain, and once, memorably, a goat that refuses to bathe. You sponsor them all. Silently. Sometimes you wander the edge of crowds. Veiled, anonymous. Just to listen. Just to hear the way language stretches and other mouths point. One boy recites a line and stumbles. His mother mouths the words, but he forgets. Still, he beams. You remember being that boy, even if no one else does. You return to your chambers, right? If memory were enough / she'd still be chewing my sleeve. It's not sad, not really. Just true. A scholar delivers you a strange report. A traveler from the north has translated your poems badly into Latin and German. One of your verses is now being taught in a monastery as a metaphor for divine loyalty. You chuckle. You write a new poem that evening. I never claimed to speak for God / only for the gallop that forgives. You don't correct them. Let them believe what they want. They always will. I in the palace library. A young scribe approaches you cautiously. He's read your early poems. He asks, was she real? You smile. Say nothing. He asks again. You nod. Once he bows, like he's heard a prayer. Later, you find a copy of one of your verses, beautifully illuminated. Slipped between the volumes on veterinary medicine and cavalry tactics.no name.no signature. Just the line, her absence changed the shape of the wind. You leave it there. Some poems don't want to be owned, just found. You spend more time walking now. Less riding. Your knees don't like the saddle anymore, but your mind still moves like hoofs. You pause sometimes at her tree. Say nothing. Touch the bark. Breathe in the scent of fig and wind. Historians write essays about your equine symbolism. Professors debate whether the mare was real, myth, metaphor, or political cipher. They all miss the point. She wasn't a symbol. She was simply known. Section 19. You're 43 when a storm knocks down part of the East Garden Wall. No one's hurt. Just a few broken tiles, some shocked peacocks, and one very indignant chef whose mint bed was flattened. But when you come to inspect the damage, your breath catches. Because part of the mosaic, her mosaic, has been exposed. The hoof, the field of gold, still intact, still gleaming. The workers apologize, offer to repair it immediately. You shake your head, leave it uncovered. You don't explain why. They don't ask. That evening, as the sky clears and the air still hums with post-rain memory, you sit across from the wall and write. She's still here / just hiding better than before. You decide to have the mosaic cleaned, not restored, just gently cleared of moss and dust. You want her visible, but untouched. The fig tree sways behind you like it agrees. Your court artist offers to add more to the wall. Expand the scene. A whole horse. Maybe a rider. You decline. A hoof is enough. One step is the whole journey, if you know what you're looking at. That same week, a young general brings you a new saddle design, sleeker, more modern, less weight on the horse. You test it, compliment its balance. But when he asks if it reminds you of your old mare, you shake your head gently. She didn't need design, just direction. He doesn't get it. He doesn't need to. You publish a new collection. Your first in years. It's slim, simple cover. No dedication. But on the first page, a single line. The wind taught me how to ride alone. Scholars call it sparse, mature, melancholy. You just call it true. Later that night, a palace musician plays a tune in the courtyard that reminds you of hoofbeats. You stop. Listen. The rhythm isn't perfect, but it's close. You close your eyes. And in the soft dark behind your lids, she trots once more. Section 20. You're 46, and you've finally stopped explaining, not out of pride, not out of sadness, just because you don't need to anymore. People know. Or they don't. Either way, you've made peace with it. The empire runs smoothly now. Letters arrive, signed by ministers who know your preferences before you speak them. The granaries are full. The poets are numerous. There's even a riding school named after you. But they don't know why that makes you smile. You walk more than you ride. The rhythm of your steps has taken on a familiar cadence. 1 foot, 1 memory, 1 breath. The fig tree by the stable grows thick with fruit each summer. Sometimes you sit beneath it and write lines that flutter away before you finish them. I don't need the whole poem / just the breeze that carries it. A visiting princess asks to see the famous hoof mosaic. She gasps, asks who it belongs to. You say, an old friend. She says, a general? You say, something greater. She doesn't press. That evening, you draft one last piece. It's not an epic, not a farewell, just a quiet musing on apples, and the curve of a neck, and how sometimes silence answers louder than any song. You place it in the cedar box, beside the others. Then seal it.inwax.in memory.in piece. Historians will debate when you retired from public life. They'll cite age, diplomacy, exhaustion. They won't mention hoofbeats, but your people will remember. The kids who grew up hearing your verses, the guards who saw you at dawn with ink on your fingers, the stable hands who learned to read just to understand your metaphors. You didn't leave behind heirs who fought over borders. You left behind verses and stories, and a kind of stillness that moved like wind across a field. That night, you sit beneath the fig tree, full moon overhead. You whisper, good girl. No one hears, but you know she does. And now, the hoofbeats fade. The garden is quiet again. The lanterns flicker low. The fig tree sways gently in the hush between one breath and the next. The palace is still. The world doesn't need you tonight. The empire hums quietly without demands, without questions, without thrones to polish or documents to sign. All that remains is a memory shaped like soft leather, silver hair, and a gaze that never judged, only watched. You sit a little deeper now, blankets tucked up, shoulders soft, the room dim and steady. Your heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of her steps, not galloping, not charging, just walking steadily across the fields of your thoughts. You remember the brush of her mane across your sleeve, the warmth of her breath on your hand, the silence that spoke louder than applause. Let that image hold you. Let it rock you gently into stillness.no, crown.no, poetry.no, empire. Just peace. And maybe a fig. You close your eyes. Breathe in the scent of hay and ink. Let the hoof prints lead you somewhere soft, somewhere quiet, somewhere she's still waiting. End of script. Sweet dreams.